Picture this. It is 3 in the morning somewhere deep inside the Zagros Mountains of western Iran. There is no moonlight. There is no sound except the low mechanical hum of a ventilation system buried under 500 feet of solid granite. A steel blast door, 12 inches thick, slides open on hydraulic rails. Behind it, a corridor stretches for nearly half a mile, carved straight into the living rock. The walls are lined with reinforced concrete. The ceiling is studded with industrial LED strips that cast a pale clinical glow over row after row of transporter erector launchers. Each one cradles a medium-range ballistic missile, fueled, armed, and aimed at pre-programmed coordinates that have not changed in over a decade. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps technicians walk calmly between the rows, checking telemetry cables, running diagnostic software on ruggedized laptops. There is no panic here, no urgency, just the quiet, methodical confidence of men who know that the most powerful air force on the planet has been staring at the mountain above them for years and still has no reliable way to reach them. This is not a bunker. This is not a storage depot. This is an underground missile city, and it just changed everything the Pentagon thought it knew about striking Iran. For decades, American military doctrine in the Middle East has rested on a single, almost religious assumption that the United States possesses absolute air superiority and that with enough precision-guided munitions, any target on Earth can be destroyed. This assumption shaped Desert Storm. It shaped the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. It shaped every classified contingency plan ever drawn up inside Central Command for a potential conflict with the Islamic Republic. The old world operated on a simple formula: identify the target, assign the sortie, drop the bomb, confirm the kill, move on. That old world is now dead. And the thing that killed it was not a new fighter jet, not a hypersonic missile, not a cyber attack. It was geology. Iran did not try to outrun American technology. It went under it, literally hundreds of meters under it. And in doing so, Tehran has forced a paradigm shift so profound that senior Pentagon officials, according to reporting first surfaced by the Wall Street Journal and later corroborated by defense analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, are now privately admitting that certain high-value Iranian military assets may be, for all practical purposes, invulnerable to conventional American airstrikes. Let that satisfying, terrifying word settle for a moment. Invulnerable. The intelligence community has known about Iranian tunnel programs since at least the early 2000s, but what has emerged over the past 18 months has forced a complete reassessment. Satellite imagery analyzed by commercial firms like Maxar Technologies and Planet Labs, combined with classified signals intelligence referenced in congressional testimony by Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines, paints a picture that is far more advanced, far more distributed, and far more operationally mature than anything Western analysts previously modeled. We are not talking about a few reinforced bunkers with blast doors. We are talking about an interconnected network of subterranean facilities spanning multiple provinces, from Kermanshah in the west to South Khorasan in the east. Facilities large enough to house not just missiles, but the transporter erector launchers, the command and control nodes, the fuel depots, and the communications relays needed to conduct a sustained ballistic missile campaign entirely from underground. General Kenneth McKenzie, the former commander of U.S. Central Command, publicly acknowledged during a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing that Iran's hardened and deeply buried targets represent, in his words, a qualitatively different challenge than anything the United States has faced in the region. Moreover, his successor and current CENTCOM leadership have echoed this assessment in closed-door briefings that have since been partially leaked to Bloomberg and Defense One. The numbers are staggering. Some facilities are estimated to sit under 300 to 500 meters of hard rock overburden, a depth that puts them beyond the reach of nearly every munition in the current American inventory. But while the world focused on Iran's nuclear negotiations and its proxy networks across Lebanon and Yemen, something far more sinister was happening underground, something that rewrites the entire calculus of a potential US-Iran military confrontation. To understand why the Pentagon is so alarmed, you need to understand the physics of bunker busting. The crown jewel of American deep penetration capability is the GBU-57A-B Massive Ordnance Penetrator, known by its acronym MOP. This weapon is enormous. It weighs roughly 30,000 pounds, nearly 15 metric tons, making it the largest non-nuclear bomb in the U.S. arsenal. It carries approximately 5,300 pounds of high explosive and is designed to penetrate up to 200 feet of hardened concrete or moderately hard rock before detonating. The MOP was developed specifically with Iran and North Korea in mind. It is delivered exclusively by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, which can carry 2 of these weapons in its internal bay. On paper, this sounds like a decisive capability. In practice, it faces a problem that no amount of engineering has yet solved. 200 feet of penetration sounds impressive until your target is sitting under 1,600 feet of mountain. The math simply does not work. According to a detailed technical analysis published by the Federation of American Scientists and corroborated by engineers formerly with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the GBU-57, even in its latest upgraded variant with enhanced hard-target void-sensing fuse technology, cannot reliably reach the depth at which Iran's newest facilities are constructed. The rock composition matters enormously. The Zagros Mountains are composed primarily of folded layers of limestone, sandite, and metamorphic rock, with compressive strengths ranging from 15,000 to over 30,000 pounds per square inch. Against this geology, the MOP's penetration capability drops significantly compared to its performance against poured concrete. One former DTRA engineer, speaking on condition of anonymity to Defense News, described the scenario bluntly. You would need to hit the exact same spot multiple times with perfect accuracy, and even then, you might only collapse the upper access tunnels without touching the operational chambers below. The weapon was built for a problem that Iran has since engineered around. And the MOP is not even the biggest issue. The biggest issue is finding the targets in the first place. Iran has invested decades in what military planners call denial and deception, a discipline the IRGC has elevated to an art form. Multiple tunnel entrances are disguised as civilian infrastructure. Road access points are camouflaged and changed seasonally. Decoy facilities have been constructed with deliberate electromagnetic signatures designed to waste satellite collection time and mislead signals intelligence analysts. Amanda, a senior geospatial analyst formerly contracted with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, described Iran's tunneling program as the most sophisticated underground denial architecture she had encountered in 23 years of imagery analysis. They do not just hide things, she said in an interview with a defense podcast that was later scrubbed from public platforms. They make you think you have found something so you stop looking for the real thing. That is a level of strategic patience most Western planners do not model for. They believed their defenses were invincible. They believed the GBU-57 could reach anything. They were wrong. And the price of that error could prove fatal to the entire American deterrence posture in the Middle East. Now consider the delivery systems hidden inside those mountains. Western media has spent years fixated on Iran's nuclear program, debating centrifuge counts and enrichment percentages. But the real revolution was happening in plain sight, or rather, completely out of sight. Iran's ballistic missile arsenal has undergone a transformation so dramatic that even Israeli military intelligence, arguably the most Iran-focused intelligence apparatus on the planet, has been forced to revise its threat assessments upward 3 times in the last 2 years alone. The backbone of Iran's underground missile force is the Emad and Ghadr family of medium-range ballistic missiles, liquid-fueled systems with ranges exceeding 1,700 kilometers, enough to reach every U.S. military installation in the Middle East, every Allied capital from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi, and every major naval facility in the Fifth Fleet's area of operations. But those are the older systems. The newer ones are what keep CENTCOM planners awake at night. The Khaybar-Shikan, first publicly tested in 2022, represents a generational leap. It is a solid-fueled missile with a range of approximately 1,500 kilometers and a reported circular error probable of under 30 meters. Solid fuel is the critical detail here. A liquid-fueled missile requires hours of fueling before launch, a window during which it is vulnerable to preemptive strike. A solid-fueled missile sits ready to fire in minutes. Combine that responsiveness with a launch facility buried under 500 meters of granite, accessible through multiple concealed tunnel exits, and you have a weapon system that is essentially immune to the first strike doctrine that has underpinned American power projections since the Cold War. According to a report by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, published in early 2024, Iran now possesses the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the entire Middle East, surpassing even Israel in sheer volume. Estimates range from 3,000 to 4,000 operational missiles of various types, and a significant portion of those missiles are now housed in facilities that the United States cannot reliably destroy. But this is not just about missiles sitting in tunnels. This is about an entirely new concept of warfare that Iran has been quietly perfecting while Washington was distracted by Ukraine and the Pacific pivot. The IRGC Aerospace Force has developed what Western analysts now call a distributed subterranean launch doctrine. Instead of concentrating missiles in a few large bases that can be targeted and destroyed, Iran has dispersed its assets across dozens, possibly hundreds, of smaller underground facilities connected by tunnel networks that allow transporter-erector launchers to move between launch points without ever surfacing. A missile can be loaded at Facility Alpha, transported underground for 40 kilometers, and launched from Facility Gamma through a concealed vertical shaft that is opened for less than 90 seconds during the launch sequence. By the time an American satellite detects the thermal bloom and relays the data to a command center, the shaft is already sealed, and the launcher is moving back underground. General Frank McKenzie described this challenge publicly during a Brookings Institution panel in late 2023. "You are not trying to hit a fixed target," he said. "You are trying to hit a target that exists for less than 2 minutes, and then ceases to exist. That is not a strike problem. That is a physics problem. This isn't just a desert standoff between generals and satellites. In a moment, I'll show you how this underground arms race just hit your own bank account and reshaped the global energy economy overnight." The financial dimension of Iran's underground missile cities is something almost no mainstream outlet has adequately covered, and it is arguably more consequential than the military dimension. Here is why. The entire architecture of oil pricing in the Persian Gulf rests on an unspoken guarantee. The guarantee that the United States Navy and Air Force can protect the flow of hydrocarbons through the Strait of Hormuz against any regional threat. Insurance companies like Lloyd's of London price their maritime risk premiums based on this assumption. Futures traders on the New York Mercantile Exchange factor it into every barrel of Brent crude. Sovereign wealth funds in the Gulf states build their 30-year investment horizons on the belief that American military dominance ensures stability. Now imagine what happens to all of those calculations when the market fully absorbs the reality that Iran possesses a survivable, second-strike-capable conventional missile force that can rain hundreds of precision-guided warheads on Tehran, on Ras Tanura, on the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, and that the United States cannot preemptively eliminate that capability. Bloomberg's Energy Desk ran a scenario analysis in March 2024 that modeled exactly this situation. Their conclusion was stark. A credible, survivable Iranian retaliatory capability adds a permanent risk premium of $8 to $14 per barrel of crude oil flowing through the Gulf. That translates directly into higher gasoline prices in Ohio, higher heating costs in Hamburg, higher manufacturing inputs in Guangzhou. Every single person watching this video is already paying for Iran's underground missile cities. They just do not know it yet. The strategic implications extend even further. Saudi Arabia's entire Vision 2030 economic transformation plan depends on regional stability and foreign direct investment. The United Arab Emirates has positioned itself as a global logistics and tourism hub predicated on the perception of security. If the market consensus shifts to accept that Iran holds an unbreakable deterrent, the investment calculus for the entire Gulf changes. Amanda, the former NGA analyst I mentioned earlier, put it in terms that cut through all the jargon. She said, "Deterrence only works if the other side believes you can take away their ability to hit back. If you cannot do that, you do not have deterrence. You have a balance of terror. And balances of terror are inherently unstable because they depend on rational actors making rational decisions at the worst possible moments." That assessment aligns precisely with a classified briefing delivered to the Senate Intelligence Committee in February 2024, portions of which were subsequently leaked to the Washington Post. The briefing reportedly concluded that in a full-scale military confrontation with Iran, the United States would be unable to prevent significant missile attacks on Allied targets in the Gulf region, even after weeks of sustained air operations. The phrase used in the leaked summary was operationally unacceptable attrition of Allied infrastructure. In plain language, that means cities burning and oil facilities destroyed while American bombers circle overhead, unable to stop the launches. While the president spoke publicly of maximum pressure and all options on the table, his closest advisors were already making quiet calculations that told a very different story, one that changed the internal debate inside the White House forever. The political fallout from this intelligence reassessment has been extraordinary, though almost entirely hidden from public view. According to reporting by Seymour Hersh, and corroborated by two former National Security Council officials speaking to The Intercept, a series of classified war games conducted at the Pentagon's Joint Warfare Analysis Center in late 2023 produced results so alarming that they triggered a fundamental policy review. The war game, codenamed Zagros Thunder, simulated a 72-hour U.S. air campaign against Iran's missile infrastructure following a hypothetical Iranian attack on a U.S. naval vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. The simulation used the most optimistic assumptions available: full stealth aircraft availability, perfect intelligence on target locations, no equipment failures, and complete Allied cooperation from Gulf states for basing rights. Even under these ideal conditions, the simulation concluded that after 72 hours of continuous strikes involving B-2 Spirit bombers delivering GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, F-35A Lightning IIs conducting suppression of enemy air defense missions, and Tomahawk cruise missile salvos from Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the United States would succeed in degrading approximately 35% of Iran's estimated underground missile capability. 35%. That meant 65% of Iran's missile force would survive intact and remain operational. Pete Hegseth, now serving in a senior defense advisory role, reportedly described the war game results to colleagues as a wake-up call of historic proportions. A 35% degradation rate is not victory, he allegedly stated. That is a campaign that costs us $200 billion and still leaves the enemy with enough firepower to shut down the Gulf for 6 months. There were only 90 minutes left in the final phase of the simulation when the blue team received the most chilling data point of all. Here is what happened when the B-2s finally received the order for the last wave. In the final 90 minutes of Zagros Thunder, the simulation's blue team, representing U.S. forces, authorized a last-ditch surge. 4 B-2 Spirit bombers, each carrying 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, were directed toward what intelligence had identified as the primary command and control node of Iran's underground missile network, a facility believed to be located beneath a mountain ridge in western Isfahan province. The bombers flew undetected. The electronic warfare environment had been softened by EA-18G Growler aircraft operating from the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group. Every suppression corridor was open. Every satellite was tasked. It was, on paper, the most perfectly executed deep strike mission in the history of simulated warfare. The 8 MOPS hit within a 12-meter radius. The seismic signature registered on monitoring stations as far away as Turkmenistan. And when the dust settled and the battle damage assessment came back from synthetic aperture radar imaging, the result was devastating, but not for Iran. The upper tunnel complex had collapsed across approximately 200 meters. The access road was buried under a landslide of shattered rock, but the electromagnetic emissions from the command node continued uninterrupted. The facility was still broadcasting. The missiles were still receiving targeting updates. The mountain had absorbed the most powerful conventional weapons on Earth and simply kept functioning. The Red Team, playing Iran, then executed a retaliatory salvo of 120 K-bar Shikan and Desful missiles from 14 different underground launch points across 3 provinces. 78 of those missiles were assessed as successfully reaching their targets. Simulated strikes hit Al Udeid Air Base, Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, the port of Jebel Ali in Dubai, and the Abqaiq oil processing facility in Saudi Arabia, the single largest crude oil stabilization plant on the planet. In the simulation, global oil prices spiked to $212 per barrel within hours. The New York Stock Exchange triggered circuit breakers. NATO invoked emergency energy protocols, and the war was only 3 days old. This simulation did not leak by accident. Multiple intelligence community sources told The Intercept that the selective disclosure was deliberate, designed to reshape the internal policy debate. And it worked. Within weeks of Zagros Thunder's classified after-action review, the National Security Council reportedly convened a Principals Committee meeting at which the consensus shifted decisively away from any preemptive military option against Iran. The logic was simple and brutal. If you cannot destroy the arsenal, you cannot afford the war. Not because America lacks the courage, but because the physics do not add up. According to a senior defense official, quoted anonymously by Defense One, the meeting ended with a single directive from the White House. Find a way to restore deterrence that does not depend on penetrating those mountains. That directive launched at least 3 parallel efforts that are still underway. The first involves accelerating development of a next-generation penetrating munition, internally referred to as the GBU-72 Advanced Bunker Defeat System, which reportedly uses a tandem warhead design with a leading charge that fractures rock before a following penetrator drives through the weakened geology. But even optimistic timelines place initial operational capability no earlier than 2028. The second effort focuses on cyber and electronic warfare capabilities designed to disrupt the command and control links between Iran's underground facilities, essentially trying to blind the network even if you cannot destroy it. The NSA and U.S. Cyber Command have reportedly been given expanded authorities for operations targeting Iranian military communications infrastructure. The third effort, and perhaps the most revealing, involves diplomacy. Quiet back-channel diplomacy of the kind that never appears in press conferences. According to Omani and Qatari diplomatic sources cited by Al Jazeera's investigative unit, American intermediaries have been exploring whether a mutual deterrence framework, something resembling a conventional arms limitation agreement, could be negotiated with Tehran. The mere existence of these talks represents an acknowledgement that the United States now treats Iran's underground missile capability as a permanent fact of the strategic landscape, rather than a problem to be bombed away. But while these 3 tracks unfold behind closed doors, the visible geopolitical consequences are already reshaping the Middle East in real time. And this is where the story moves from the Pentagon's classified briefing rooms into the lives of every person watching. 3 scenarios now dominate the thinking of serious analysts, and each one leads to a fundamentally different world. The first scenario is managed deterrence. In this pathway, the United States and Iran arrive at an unspoken mutual understanding, similar to the Cold War concept of mutually assured destruction, but applied at a conventional level. Iran refrains from provocative deployments. The United States refrains from direct strikes. Both sides maintain their capabilities, but avoid triggering the escalation ladder. Gulf states adjust by diversifying their security partnerships, buying more Chinese and Russian air defense systems, hedging their bets. Oil markets stabilize at a new higher baseline. The world pays more for energy. Tensions simmer but do not boil. This is the outcome most analysts at CSIS and the Brookings Institution consider most likely in the near term. It is also the least stable because it depends entirely on neither side miscalculating. The second scenario is regional realignment. In this pathway, the revelation of Iran's invulnerable missile capability triggers a fundamental restructuring of Middle Eastern alliances. Saudi Arabia, recognizing that the American security umbrella has holes in it, accelerates its own ballistic missile program, a program that U.S. intelligence has long known about but rarely discussed publicly. The kingdom already possesses Chinese-made DF-3A intermediate-range ballistic missiles, purchased secretly in the late 1980s. A next-generation Saudi missile capability, potentially with Pakistani technical assistance, would trigger a conventional arms race across the Gulf. The UAE, Bahrain, and Qatar would seek their own deterrence, or bind themselves even more tightly to external guarantors. Turkey, already pursuing an independent defense industrial strategy, would use the moment to expand its influence. Israel, which has maintained its own undeclared nuclear deterrent for decades, would face pressure to develop new conventional options or consider even more extreme measures. Amanda, reflecting on this scenario during a private symposium hosted by the Atlantic Council, called it the multipolar nightmare. Everyone arms up, she said. Nobody trusts anyone. And the Strait of Hormuz becomes the most dangerous waterway on Earth, not because anyone wants a war, but because everyone is preparing for one. The third scenario is the one nobody in Washington wants to discuss publicly, but everyone discusses privately. Total escalation. A miscalculation in the Strait of Hormuz. An Iranian proxy strike that crosses an invisible red line. A cyber attack on critical infrastructure that is attributed incorrectly. In this pathway, The United States launches the air campaign everyone has planned for, knowing it will only partially succeed. Iran retaliates with its surviving missile force. Gulf infrastructure is devastated. Oil markets collapse into chaos. And then the real question arrives, the question that Zagros Thunder deliberately left unanswered. What happens on day 4? When the conventional options are exhausted and the missiles are still flying from under the mountains, does the conflict stay conventional? That question, according to multiple former senior officials who spoke to the New York Times in a joint investigation with ProPublica, is the single most terrifying gap in current American strategic planning. There is no good answer. There is no classified briefing that resolves it. There is only the physics of 500 meters of rock and the political reality that no American president wants to be the one who orders what comes after conventional options fail. And this brings us back to that tunnel deep inside the Zagros Mountains. 3 a.m, the hum of ventilation systems, the pale glow of LED lights on silent rows of fueled and ready missiles, the technicians walking their quiet rounds. They are not heroes in this story. They are not villains. They are variables in an equation that the most powerful military on Earth has not yet solved. Iran did not beat America with superior technology. It did not beat America with a larger army or a bigger navy or a more advanced air force. It beat America with patience, with geology, and with a strategic insight so simple it borders on elegance. You do not need to outrun the eagle if you can burrow beneath the earth where its talons cannot reach. The Pentagon knows this now. The White House knows this now. The oil markets know this now. The only question left, the question that will define the next decade of Middle Eastern geopolitics, is whether the rest of the world will adapt to this new reality before that reality adapts to them. Because the mountains of Iran are no longer just mountains. They are the walls of a fortress that was built not to win a war, but to make war unwinnable. And in the brutal logic of 21st century deterrence, that might be the most powerful weapon of all. The skies over the Middle East still belong to America, but the earth beneath Iran belongs to Iran. And for the first time in the modern era, the earth is winning.